Hello and welcome to this edition of Global Business on CGTN. I'm Lily Liu, and these are headlines we're tracking at this hour. Bullish outlook. Citigroup raises its rating on China's market to overweight, showing greater confidence in Chinese assets for the second half of this year. Food risk. Global food supplies are under threat from El Nino, and we examine the economic fallout from higher prices to supply chain disruptions. Tariff hike. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced new 50% tariffs on certain Canadian goods, citing what he calls discriminatory treatment. And as usual, a quick check on Chinese mainland stock markets, where we see key indices finish the day with gains. This is where the key benchmark Shanghai Composite Index stands at the end of the session, adding close to 70 points there, or jumping about 1.8%. But we do see bigger gains here in tech shares, jumping about 7%. The China's index stands at 3,686 points at the end of the session. We're going to get you more details on how markets are doing today. In the meantime, let's get a quick look at how regional shares are faring and how Wall Street closed out overnight. Top story of the day, Citigroup has raised its rating on Chinese stocks to overweight from neutral, signaling greater confidence in Chinese assets for the second half of this year. In a research note released on Monday, Citi analysts said Chinese equity market is well positioned to gain from a favorable global backdrop and a recovery in corporate profits. The report noted that investment opportunities in emerging markets are undergoing structural changes. Citi sees more room for upside if geopolitical risks subside, global liquidity improves, and macroeconomic conditions stay supportive. The bank also forecasts strong earnings growth for MSCI emerging markets index companies this year, with China and the Republic of Korea expected to be among the best performers. A wave of state-owned enterprises, listed companies, and major insurers have announced share buybacks, stake increases, and dividend payouts over the past 2 days, signaling strong confidence in China's capital markets. On Monday, 4 of the country's largest insurers, China Pacific Insurance, Ping An, PICC, and NIC, issued rare coordinated statements voicing firm support for the capital market. The statements came alongside a fresh round of buyback and stake increase initiatives from major central SOEs. China Aluminum led the way with a share purchase plan valued up to 2 billion yuan, around $295 million, and Nari Technology announced a repurchase program ranging from 500 million to 1 billion yuan. Now, those moves followed Sunday's announcement from state-owned investment firms China Reform Holdings and China Chentong, which disclosed cumulative purchases of 50 billion yuan and nearly 10 billion yuan in central SOE stocks. China's largest insurance companies say that they are ready to invest more money in technology and new businesses. They plan to buy more company shares and back projects that bring fresh ideas and better ways of doing things.
China's economy is resilient and robust. New growth drivers represented by high-end manufacturing and the digital economy are accelerating. The dividends of industrial upgrading and technological innovation are being realized at the listed company level, providing solid fundamental support for the steady and healthy development of the capital market. In recent years, we have steadily increased equity allocations, actively participated in the long-term stock investment pilot, and established a 10 billion yuan private securities investment fund. We have also stepped up investment research in technological innovation, green and low-carbon development, healthcare, and other areas, and are committed to building a long-term, stable, and balanced equity investment portfolio.
We play our role as long-term, patient investors. While investing in value stocks, we are also actively keeping an eye on new industries, new quality productive forces, new technology, new energy, and new infrastructure. We believe these are very important forces that China can rely on to compete globally in the future.
The 2026 World Artificial Intelligence Conference wrapped up in Shanghai on Monday, but one discussion remains central: making AI more accessible and inclusive for everyone. With global AI governance in the spotlight, China's open-source AI models are lowering innovation barriers and cutting deployment costs, enabling more countries, particularly developing economies, to join the AI revolution. Our reporter He Jingyi spoke with international participants about how China's open-source approach fosters a more inclusive AI ecosystem through technology sharing.
So my point is that the initiative that was proposed by China and supported by Russia is very important for the developing countries to get an equal access to the newest AI technologies itself and being able to create new products based on that. So we appreciate the effort that China is proposing, and we will participate to the maximum possible extent.
China's homegrown AI innovations, represented by our optoelectronic computing tech, support an open global AI ecosystem in 2 dimensions. Domestically, we open our chip architecture and standard research resource to domestic industrial partners to build an independent, collaborative supply chain. Globally, via platforms like WISC, we share low-carbon photonic computing engineering experience with international peers, push coordinated global AI governance, and jointly set green computation industrial standards, avoiding closed technology barrier and advancing inclusive, sustainable AI development worldwide.
I think it must be open source for everyone in Kazakhstan and China, because I can see AI must be used for every person who can use it. As I know, they already open a lot of open source data here, especially for the emergency situation, monitoring, analyzing things, disaster monitoring. So yeah, it's good things. It must be open for every infrastructure which has AI or some open data source.
Artificial intelligence is also reshaping China's labor market. The Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security recently unveiled 12 new occupations, several of which are directly tied to AI and emerging industries, including embodied intelligence, robot technicians, and sports data analysts. Now, these additions build on more than 20 AI-related roles among the 72 new occupations introduced during the previous 5-year plan period, starting in 2021. Now, that means more than a quarter of new jobs are now in AI. The ministry estimates each new occupation could generate 300,000 to 500,000 jobs in its early stages. China has built the world's largest comprehensive transport system, and over the past 5 years, the network has exceeded 6 million kilometers, with fixed asset investment reaching 18.8 trillion yuan, or $2.8 trillion. Passenger traffic has surged, with high-speed rail trips up 132%, and civil aviation passenger volume up 84%. Maritime and express shipments continue to lead global rankings. Vice President Xu Chengguang has unveiled the ministry's goals for building a transport powerhouse during the 15th five-year plan period.
We're working to improve transport safety and resilience, build a unified and open transport market, integrate AI into the sector, scale up new energy-heavy trucks, and develop zero-carbon freight corridors. By 2030, we expect to make decisive progress toward building a modern, fully integrated transport system.
And now for a closer look at how AI is reshaping the job market and driving new employment opportunities. Let's bring in Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Mr. Zhou, thank you so much for joining us on the program. So let's start with the news that we just heard about how AI is impacting the job market. When we were hearing that scores of new AI-related job titles are officially recognized, industries are actually undergoing rapid transformations as well. So under such circumstances, circumstances, how can we update vocational standard and also skill training systems to ensure that workers are properly equipped to keep up with the fast pace of AI development?
Well, it is a very important question. How can we just keep the skill systems together with the development of the AI itself? I think that if we are trying to talk about that topic, we need to look at the facts, whether the AI is connected with the manufacturing or some kind of other services industries. If they are spreading, I think that we are trying to welcome that the companies, no matter from the big company and also the small companies, together to discuss about the possible standards and the skills that is needed for these new occupations. And I think that the second is also important. We should try to treat the development as an ecosystem. It's not just on specific occupation. We should try to combine the different kind of occupations and trying to think that in the AI economy's ways. So we have to try to also include some of the standards to do with the new energy, green development. And I mean, in such kind of system, we need to have a better requirement on the standards, and that is also required to be abided by the enterprises and also the organizations.
So we're just hearing that China has the world's largest comprehensive transport network. So which are the main real-world applications of AI in the transportation sector? And in what ways is AI being used to help to upgrade and modernize transport infrastructure across China?
Well, transportation is not just about the physical items. It is really about the information. So there are so many informations, and we have a better and better demand on the speed of this information gathering and the dealing. So the AI is able to be used in this, to identify the possible barriers and what kind of the things to follow the train or track the logistics. I think that transportation can be improved by better allocate all the related stakeholders and also the hardwares. And second is that we are trying to use AI to support the public infrastructure together with some of the private infrastructure. I think that's a combination of the different demands is really important to support the better efficiencies on the transportations. And we are also trying to introduce more abilities about the different kinds of transportations to improve the total efficiency of the transportations and the logistics.
Thank you so much for your insights. That's Mr. Zhou Mi from the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation for us. And let's stay with AI, where renewable energy is becoming the preferred power source for many countries, but its unpredictability makes adoption difficult. An Austrian-based startup hopes to change this with the use of artificial intelligence. Johannes Pleschberger reports from Vienna.
Too little wind for turbines, a cloud blocking the sun. Every change in the weather affects the amount of electricity flowing through power lines, and even small fluctuations can destabilize power networks. Clemens Wassner believes AI can help prevent that. His startup uses reinforcement learning to stabilize power grids. The system can react faster and evaluate more options than operators switching the grid manually.
In case a blackout might happen, our solution can go 60% longer than, let's say, normal manual switching.
The AI agent can predict overloads and suggests the fastest way to restore balance.
This part of the grid is overloaded. So it is telling you if you switch these 3 stations, the overload here and here will vanish. So it's a little bit like traffic routing.
Just like roads, power lines form an interconnected network, allowing electricity to be rerouted from overloaded lines to those with spare capacity, either through manual switching or with the help of AI. Grid switching is now part of everyday operations. Most electricity networks were built decades ago for steady supplies from fossil fuels and nuclear power. Today's mix of wind and solar makes balancing the grid far more challenging. East of Vienna, there's often so much wind and solar power that not all of it can be used. Some of it has to be switched off or stored in batteries to keep the grid stable. At the same time, other parts of the country aren't generating enough electricity, creating bottlenecks in the network. AI can solve both problems, predicting supply and demand in real time, directing power where it's needed most, and keeping the grid balanced.
I spent 10 years in Asia, a long time also in Beijing and China, and I saw how AI is picking up in China. So when I returned to Austria in 2016, the idea was to create a company that is applying and rolling out AI to real-world use cases.
So far, the company has worked with power grid operators in France and the Netherlands. Clemens hopes more countries will embrace his AI solution to strengthen the resilience of their electricity networks. Johannes Bleschberger, CGTN, Vienna.
You're watching Global Business on CGTN. Still to come on the program. Food risk. Global food supplies are under threat from El Nino. And we examine the economic fallout from higher prices to supply chain disruptions.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Greece has recorded its first heat wave of the summer, with neighboring North Macedonia also experiencing intense heat. 24 weather stations across Greece on Monday recorded temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. Authorities have advised people to stay indoors during peak hours and have opened air-conditioned public centers. The fire brigade has also warned of an increased wildfire risk. In North Macedonia, temperatures in the capital Skopje has reached 39 degrees Celsius. Emergency workers have urged people to avoid direct sunlight as heat-related costs increase. Red Cross workers and the police have also distributed water across the city. Extreme weather tied to the El Nino phenomenon is now affecting regions worldwide, with persistent heat waves hitting parts of Europe and Africa. The U.S. National Weather Service predicts a strong El Nino will emerge between October and December and is expected to become the most intense since 1950. Forecasters also say the pattern will likely continue into early spring of next year, and these extreme conditions are also raising concerns over global food supplies. Goldman Sachs economists project the phenomenon could send food prices up by 15.8% worldwide, with the economic impact stretching into the latter half of 2028. Uganda is facing one of its worst dry spells in recent years, with prolonged drought destroying crops, threatening food supplies and pushing vulnerable communities closer to hunger. The government has started distributing emergency aid in the worst-hit Karamoja region, where officials say that food shortages have already caused death. CGTN's Michael Balaki reports.
Months without meaningful rainfall have left fields dry and crops withered across parts of Uganda. For thousands of farmers who depend on seasonal rains, the drought is wiping out harvests, shrinking incomes, and raising fears over food security. The situation is most severe in the northeastern region of Karamoja, where prolonged dry conditions have triggered a growing humanitarian response.
Prolonged dry conditions have led to crop failure and food shortages. Sadly, it has been reported that 16 people have died from causes associated with food shortages in the region.
The government has started delivering emergency food to the worst affected communities and says more relief is on the way. Meanwhile, Uganda's Environment Ministry warns that below average rainfall and unusually high temperatures are likely to persist through July into August, increasing pressure on crops, livestock, and already scarce water supplies. The worst of the drought is being felt hundreds of kilometers from here in Karamoja, but officials warn its effects won't stay there. Low agricultural production could tighten food supplies and drive up prices, affecting households across the country. Authorities say emergency food assistance is now being expanded as more districts report worsening conditions.
The Prime Minister has also arranged for another consignment of relief food for immediate distribution to the most affected districts requiring urgent assistance. including Kabong, Kotido, Amdat, Napak, and Moroto.
For many farmers, however, the assistance is coming too late. For months, they had called out for help as they watched their crops fail under relentless heat.
We rely
on matoke and milk to get by, but the sun has been way too harsh lately. This dry spell has really cut down the milk our cows give because the grazing areas have dried up and the heat has wreaked our banana plantations too. We even took out bank loans to invest in the farms, but now we can't even afford to pay them back.
Scientists say the drought is another reminder of how climate change is making weather patterns across East Africa more unpredictable. And while Uganda awaits for the rains to return, forecasters warn that a developing El Nino later this year could bring heavier rainfall to parts of the region, raising the risk of flooding in areas now struggling with drought. The shifting extremes are exposing the growing vulnerability of millions of people whose livelihoods depend on rain-fed agriculture. Mike Kobaleke, CGTN, Kampala.
Time now for we to get some insights on climate and weather events and their impact on business operations. For that, let's bring in Mr. Liu Baochen, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics, University of International Business and Economics. Professor Liu, thank you so much for being with us on the program. So we know that agriculture is directly related to weather events, but what are the other key industries that are facing direct disruptions from this growing frequency of extreme weather events?
Yes, apart from farming, animal husbandry, and many other industries are being adversely affected with such a sort of extreme weather. First, it is really the logistics. Many of the roads are being, flooded, and some ports are being obstructed, and also the sea roads, particularly with the river roads, with different tidal waves that's there to hurt the normal transportation industry. And then the manufacturer, particularly the construction sites, who are really under the blazing sun and also with storm and rains, are being heavily affected in terms of productivity, in terms of the delivery schedule. And then tourism is also something that's highly affected because people are really getting fearful of getting stuck in the airport, or they face certain unpredictable risks when they travel to some of the areas that are very interesting and with less of the considered aid supply, etc. So they may shorten the travel season. And then energy, of course, is also facing a very high demand because air conditioning is more of a daily necessity for those regions who do not really rely on air conditioning. For example, in northern part of Europe, the people are really fighting for some of the air conditioned utilities. But of course, in the meantime, it provides opportunities for some businesses who are really agile to catch up such opportunity to provide more of the weather-resistant type of products, and also to provide consulting, particularly supported by the AI facilities.
And also, extreme weather actually is a big headache for insurance companies. It actually has changed the entire risk landscape. So do you think that rising insurance premiums would become a long-term norm?
Well, immediately, if these unpredictable issues do happen, of course, they have to pay higher on the claims. But I think this is also a very strong reminder for them to shift their strategy, for the insurers really to shift from simply offering compensation based on probability on a normal convention, now into more of the risk management. So early intervention and also getting more engaged in partnership with those insured, be it households or be it the companies, for them to provide more of the consulting, to utilize more of the modern technologies to deal with the weather forecast and also to help companies to deal with climate, the stress test. So these are really the issues that insurers can really do. But, critically, it requires a team up between the public sector and also the private sector together, and then the insurers can provide better expertise to address such sort of issue. That's also to make those premiums more affordable on both sides.
Actually, now climate resilience is a core commercial capability. So what do you think is the most urgent step for businesses to sharpen their weapon against climate change risks?
Yeah, so in my research, businesses used to rely on the climate issues as part of the compliance to deal with the corporate social responsibility, but now it becomes part of their business strategy. So the board of directors will have to consider how they can really integrate the climate change issue, because this is going to be such a trend, which is going to be, continue, over the years to come. So therefore, they really need to integrate into that. So therefore, for business transition, from the more of the vulnerable businesses now into more of the weather resilient business, like dealing with artificial intelligence and dealing with big data to help to be able to better to forecast to the weather changes, and also to deal with more of the disaster relief, and also they need to prepare a contingency plan. And of course, in terms of the normal business, they need also to build more alternatives in their supply chain, and they need to redefine the radius of their business cluster. And then, of course, to work together with the insurance companies as how they can really train their people and also build a more resilient type of the critical infrastructure to address such sort of issue. That can really help them to mitigate some of the losses they have to face. But of course, they also need to really consider to diversify their marketplace so that the trading routes can be more reliable and more predictable.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. That's Professor Liu Baocheng from UIBE for us. Thank you. And still to come here on Global Business. Another tariff hike as U.S. President Donald Trump announces a new 50% tariffs on certain Canadian goods, citing what he calls discriminatory treatment.
A vast land of 1.4 billion people. The world's second largest economy. Home to stories of the unexpected, the unimaginable, the breathtaking. Stories that touch the soul. Feel the speed, the passion. Enjoy spectacular natural and cultural landscapes. Feel the thrill of cutting-edge innovations. Discovering China. Global Biz. China Travel. We present to China never seen before. 24/7 at your fingertips.
Welcome back. The United States will impose a 50% tariff on certain Canadian goods from August the 19th in retaliation for what Washington calls unfair trade practices. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff order signed on Monday targets Canadian dairy products, alcoholic beverages, motor vehicles, and related goods. Energy products, potash, fish, and critical minerals are exempt. Trump claims Canada's 25% auto tariff and provincial alcohol bans have led to a sharp decrease in U.S. vehicle and beverage exports between 2024 and 2026. The tariff order comes weeks after Washington chose not to renew the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. The office of Prime Minister Mark Carney says that Canada is ready to address its trade disputes with the U.S. All three major U.S. indices closed lower on Monday as investors looked ahead to earnings reports from big technology firms due later this week. The tech-heavy Nasdaq fell less than the S&P 500 and the Dow, with the chip sector recovering some of its prior week losses. Here's more from Karina Mitchell in New York.
Earnings season starting to ramp up. General Motors set to report before the bell on Tuesday, and analysts looking there to see if they can extend a very impressive 8-quarter win streak. Beyond the headline numbers, the big question is, what do profit margins look like? Are they being squeezed at all, particularly when it comes to North American sales? And what does its EV strategy look like as well? Because in the U.S., hoping to make gains and strides there, because they do face stiff competition overseas from other players, including Chinese automakers. The other big company set to report is Google's parent, Alphabet, later in the week. There, the big questions are how much cloud revenue growth do we see, and is its AI spend paying off? If either of those numbers come in weak, then that stock will take a hit, and it will be seen as a bellwether for the rest of the tech sector set to report, and AI and chip already taking a hammering. And the World Cup may be over, but Spain is not the only winner. FIFA has said it generated a record $15 billion in total revenue over the course of the tournament. And then prediction market players, Kalshi and Polymarket, saying that they netted almost $6 billion in trades tied to just the final and who would win their bets between Argentina and Spain. Overall, it was a great result. Okay, on we go to Wall Street to see how markets fared on the day. The major benchmarks were lower for the most part. The Dow off by 0.6%, Nasdaq essentially flat, and the S&P off by 0.2%. Quick look ahead to the Tuesday session. As I say, we will look for those GM earnings results, and Hasbro, the toy maker, also set to report, as well as Halliburton. Karina Mitchell, CGTN, New York.
Time now to get a check on some other business headlines we're tracking at the hour. The U.S. leading economic index fell 0.2% in June, giving back some of its gains from the previous 2 months. That is according to data from the Conference Board. Still, the first half decline stood at 0.3%, much milder than the 1.1% contraction in the second half of last year. The index is a key signal for turning points in the business cycle. AMD and Microsoft have announced an expanded strategic partnership to deliver a full-stack AMD AI solution for Azure. Under the deal, Microsoft will deploy AMD's Helios platform to power frontier model AI interference for Microsoft, its AI customers, and Azure AI services. UK unemployment held at 4.9% in the 3 months to May, defying expectations of a rise to 5%. The number of jobless fell by 17,000, driven by declines in both the 6 to 12 months and over 12 months categories. Let's stay in Europe. British Labour Party leader Andy Burnham is the UK's new Prime Minister. He also has vowed to deliver a new political and economic model to tackle the country's major challenges. Burnham is the 7th British Prime Minister since 2016 and succeeds Starmer, who held the post for 2 years. Jeff Moody in London reports on the turnover.
It's a few short steps from the front door of number 10 to the podium. But however many friends line the route, sometimes they're the loneliest steps of all.
My work is done.
The eyes of the world are on this little street in London. The world's news hounds packed into pens and waiting for the kill, for the emotion to show. In the end, though, a speech shot through with good grace.
And I thank the British people for the opportunity to serve. I go with good grace, I go with a smile, and I go proud of everything that we have achieved. Thank you very much.
It's a bruising ending. It always is. But the Prime Minister has one more job still to do while he still is the Prime Minister. One more appointment still to keep. And it's the most important appointment of them all.
It's a short ride from Downing Street to Buckingham Palace. Starmer's last in his ministerial car, but today the Prime Minister is here for one reason only, to resign. Enter Andy Burnham, arriving at the palace to accept the King's invitation to form a government in an ancient tradition called the kissing of the hands. Back at Downing Street, the mood changes, excitement as the country's new leader approaches.
And here he is, Andy Burnham, Britain's 7th Prime Minister in a decade.
Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. And that is our challenge, to make politics work, to make it work better.
And so begins another fresh start for a country that's weary of starting afresh. The electorate is impatient. It wants change. And if Burnham wants to avoid that lonely walk, he'll have to deliver fast. Jeff Moody, CGTN, Downing Street.
Well, this new Labour Party leader has promised to radically change Britain's political system to quickly raise living standards. Our reporter Li Jianhua has been watching the story closely in London and shares with us what it means for ordinary people.
The country requires fresh leadership.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold.
In politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
I am resigning.
I will shortly be seeing His Majesty the King to offer my resignation as Prime Minister.
I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
In the past 10 years, 6 Prime Ministers have moved in and out of number 10. Politics in Britain can move remarkably quickly. And interestingly, my real exchange with the country's politics all started with an exchange rate. Well, imagine this is 3 years ago. Months before moving to Britain, I walked into a bank in Beijing to exchange some yuan for pounds. Well, the timing turned out to be fortunate for me. British pound slumped because of Liz Truss's mini budget, a package of unfunded tax cuts and increased government borrowing. And suddenly, my savings stretched a little. In some sense, her policy benefited me even before I landed, but that also led to her downfall just 49 days in office, the shortest serving Prime Minister ever. By the time I arrived in London, the Prime Minister was already Rishi Sunak. For the new Prime Minister, the problems the country faced remained the same. Well, the biggest thing I noticed wasn't number 10 back then. It was the cost of living, the prices of food, electricity, and gas. And very interestingly, Tesco grapes have become my personal inflation index. 3 years ago, I remember they were only £2.20. Now, they're £3. Inflation was over 10% when I first arrived. One of Rishi Sunak's priorities was to lower inflation to the target of 2%. He achieved it in May 2024, but the prices kept growing, just slightly more slowly. Many households were still feeling the squeeze. Sunak's other priorities included grow the economy, reduce the NHS waiting lists, stop the boats, and cut the debt, the same challenges his predecessors hoped to overcome. Chief among them, a defining issue for him was immigration. Sunak made the Rwanda plan the main strategy to curb illegal immigration. Around £700 million was spent, but before it was scrapped, only 4 volunteers were sent to Rwanda. Then in July 2024, voters made another choice. Labour and Keir Starmer roared back with a landslide victory after 14 years. But again, the same problems were just passed on to the next Prime Minister, and voters were expecting effective solutions. But Starmer promised stability after years of political turmoil, growth to improve living standards and reset relations with international partners. To fund higher spending on public services, the government unveiled £40 billion of tax rises, the biggest tax-raising budget in more than 30 years. Keir Starmer also visited China in January this year to reset ties with the world's second-largest economy, becoming the first Prime Minister to visit China in 8 years. The UK's economy did grow, but only modestly. Less than 2 years after winning a landslide general election, voters gave Starmer a stark warning. It's not only the economy, but immigration and public services, including the NHS and social care. Voters didn't feel the change they expected. Labour suffered heavy losses in this year's local elections, so did support for Starmer. Now the same problems are passed on again to the next Prime Minister. Looking back, changing Prime Ministers is only part of the story. Over the past decade, Britain has navigated Brexit, a pandemic, conflict in Europe, an energy crisis, high inflation and mounting pressure on public services. Every Prime Minister has inherited many of the same long-term challenges. Britain's political system may make it easier to change leaders, a reflection of voters demanding results, not promises. But can a revolving door at number 10 really solve long-term problems that have been building for years? In the space of 3 years, I've seen Prime Ministers come and go, but perhaps no one has seen more political change than Larry the Cat, Downing Street's chief mouser, preparing to greet another one.
And with that, I'm wrapping up this edition of Global Business on CGTN. I'm Lily in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.